Hello,
Hello.
and welcome to the podcast.
Whoa. This is crazy.
Yeah, it's just called the podcast. That's the working title. So we've got something a bit different for you guys today. Instead of my usual scripted videos, we're going to be going for something that's a bit more freestyle. And also the topic will be a bit different to what I usually cover. So today we're going to be talking about something a bit different to what I usually do, and that is the War of the Roses. And in this case, we're going to be talking about its outbreak at the end of the 100 Years' War. So today we're joined by my friend Danny.
Hello.
So Danny, would you like to fill us in on the context around 1453?
Okay.
The
Yes.
date of beginnings.
Yes. So the 100 Years' War ended then. That was a war that had been going on for 116 years, actually, between England and France, because the kings of England, starting with Edward III, thought they had a stronger claim to the French throne. Over that 116-year period, the quality of the English kings dipped and waned. So Edward III was great, but he was followed by Richard II, who was not great. Eventually get to Henry V, who was fantastic and almost became King of France. But then he died young, and his 2-month-old son, Henry VI, took over, and he was not very good at anything.
Well, that's not great for England at the time.
No, it's not his fault, but he's not very good. So he's king for a long time, from 1426 onwards for now. And then in 1453, there's the Battle of Castillon, which ends the 100 Years' War overall. Up until then, the campaigns under Henry VI had been pretty weak in France. They'd lost most of Normandy. They'd given away Maine in a treaty with France, which most of England hated. And then on top of it all, they lost their last little bit of land in southern France, in Aquitaine, in the Battle of Castillon. When Henry VI heard the news, he fainted and went into some sort of mental shock, catatonic state.
I can understand that, to be honest.
Yeah.
England's lost all of its overseas possessions
Yeah.
in France. That can't be good.
No, he was not happy. And then he felt, not quite a coma, like he was awake, he just physically couldn't do anything. And that is sort of where the story begins.
So by 1453, England has more or less been booted out of France.
Yeah,
completely.
other than Calais.
Which
not very much,
I
really.
think they kept until
1558.
mid 16th century.
Yeah.
So I think it's safe to say that the war was pretty disastrous for England. They didn't really get what they wanted in the end. France was the undisputed victor, although they didn't exactly come out of it unscathed. Well, 1453, that's a big year, not just in English history, but in European history. So 1453 marked the end of the Byzantine Empire, so the Roman Empire in its...
R.I.P.
Yep, in its last arguable iteration, represented a major loss for Christianity and the sort of ascendancy of Islam over Anatolia. And yeah, I think it's safe to say that a lot of monarchs at the time in Western Europe weren't exactly feeling too confident. Either they were fighting each other, or they feared that they later had to fight the Turks. Yeah, so 1453. At this point, England has lost the 100 Years' War, and obviously losing a war means there's going to be a lot of instability after. So what was it like for the sort of aristocracy around this point?
At that point, things were already pretty tense. Already there were beginnings of dissent. You've got the king's cousin, Richard, the Duke of York, who initially was fairly poor, but he was descended from 2 of Edward III's sons, including the 2nd and 4th of his sons, whereas Henry VI was only from the 3rd son. So there were some who would say Richard's got a stronger claim to the throne, but for now that's not a problem. He's content being a reasonably loyal noble. He's also descended from the Mortimer family, which eventually, when they all died off, he inherited all of their wealth, and they were really wealthy. They had all of the Welsh border, pretty much, and a lot of lands in Wales in the north. You also had the Beaufort family, who were the Dukes of Somerset. They come up in power after 1450, and before then you had the Duke of Suffolk, William de la Pole, who was killed in 1450 because he was so unpopular. He Henry VI was a weak king, like mentally. He'd let anyone who had his ear rule the country, basically. And if you've got one corrupt noble, like William de la Pole, you can use that to your advantage and get a lot out of a weak king. But eventually, he committed murder, and...
Well, that is not a good crime to commit in any age.
and Henry couldn't really allow him to be powerful anymore, so he exiled him to France, but then he got killed by some angry Kentish people on the way.
As you do.
And then they rebelled in 1450, and York's name got involved in the rebellion. He himself wasn't involved, but...
So he's been implicated.
Yeah.
He's had no actual role.
Yeah, he was busy in Ireland doing a decent job of governing. But all the rebels were sort of saying that York's a pretty good governor and commander. Maybe Henry VI should listen to him a bit more. And that didn't go down well. And then 2 years later, in 1452, York came back from Ireland to sort of clear his name from Cade's rebellion and say, look, it wasn't me. Somerset is a bad governor because he'd filled the void that Suffolk left. Feel free to listen to me a bit more. But there were still those who thought he was just doing treason, trying to take the throne, basically. And it didn't go well. He had two other supporters, the Earl of Devon and Lord Cobham, and that didn't really count for very much.
So these were both quite sort of minor nobles at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the Lord's just a lord. An Earl of Devon could have been powerful, but he just wasn't at the time, because there were feuds everywhere. Another thing with a weak king, two families in the same sort of region of England can easily start fighting over who should be more powerful. Like in the north, you've got the Nevilles and the Percys. They'd been feuding for a long time, but that kicked off under Henry VI because he was so weak and didn't appear to be able to end any feuds anywhere, to the point that the Percys attacked a Neville wedding in Yorkshire
They attacked a wedding.
Yeah, they just hated each other so much.
Oh,
I think that was in 1453 as well. I could be wrong, but I think it was then.
I think actually, I'm not sure if you've seen Game of Thrones, but the Red Wedding is infamously actually based, I think, on a very similar event. So that could have been that may have been the actual inspiration.
Yeah, I thought that was from Scottish history. But I could be wrong. I could be wrong mistaken, as well. They did. There was an attack on a wedding, and it might have inspired George R. R. Martin. A wedding inspired.
One of the weddings of all time.
Him. Yeah. I think actually it probably was 1453 because, again, weak king, didn't punish the Percys for attacking a wedding, and the Nevilles drifted towards supporting York, and the Nevilles were incredibly powerful. They had most of the north in their pocket, and they had two of the oldest and richest earldoms in England, and that's the Earl of Salisbury and his son, the Earl of Warwick. By 1453, things were pretty tense in England.
So we've got the Nevilles versus the Percys, and they've been feuding for, long before this all kicked off. So you see that the Neville family are quite powerful. They hold, huge swathes of land in northern England. How were the Percys doing at this point in time?
Their traditional title, which they still have today, which is weird, is the Earls of Northumberland. So they've generally been entrusted with defending the border from Scotland. It's pretty much the north of England is between York, the King, and the Nevilles and the Percys. So
it's like a three-way split, essentially.
Yeah. And with York and the King being in London or in Ireland, really the north is just ruled between the Nevilles and the Percys.
So it's almost like its own sort of mini kingdom in a way.
Basically, yeah. The King in the north.
The King in the
back
north.
to the Game of Thrones.
We'll probably be hearing a lot about that over the next few sessions. So the wedding gets attacked. Then what happens after this?
Well, the wedding itself just helps to push the Nevilles towards supporting York. They didn't in 1452 because they had no real need to, but now there's no justice being done to the people who've attacked their wedding. And as well as that, York is married to Salisbury's sister, so there's another reason for the Nevilles to support them, supporting the family, keeping it, but
So
they've
there are
got
also blood
actual
ties as
reasons.
well.
Yeah, so the wedding puts them into the York camp. By 1453, after the Battle of Castillon, Henry VI collapses. The government just starts to shut down. Initially, they think they can carry on, and they try and manage until March 1454, and then the Chancellor dies. And that is the point of no return, because without a Chancellor in those times, you simply couldn't govern. They couldn't even pretend that Henry VI was okay. He wasn't okay. He had his son born in October 1453, and his wife presented the child to him, and just nothing. He didn't even respond to the fact that he is now a father.
Honestly, I'm surprised that he was able to be a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was very pious. I think that's the only reason. He's like, well, I'm married to her now,
What else
so
am I gonna do with it?
I can. And he only ever had one child, so he's probably just thought, well, I've done it once. That's enough. Now let me pray.
So his child is born in October of 1453. And obviously, you can't have a child king. This isn't a game of Crusader Kings. So who exactly is sort of vying for the throne? Where are the cards being laid down?
At the moment, no one in particular is looking to challenge Henry on the throne. He's still he's just the accepted king. He's now got an heir, which dynastically makes him look like a stronger king. And it's not until 1460 that the war turns from a matter of how to govern England to who should be the king. So for now, everyone's okay. Henry's wife, Margaret of Anjou, French princess, doesn't trust the Duke of York at all, and is convinced, though, that he is after the throne already. They've never got on.
So at this point, the Duke of York holds no ambition to
No.
be ruler of England. He's content where he is.
Yeah,
He thinks he's doing a good enough job.
Yeah, he just wants England to be governed better, and thinks Somerset, as the king's favourite, is just, corrupt.
And a bit shit.
Yeah. He was the one that lost the war in France, really. So he doesn't like him for that, because York had a lot of lands in France that he couldn't defend, and Somerset just gave away. And there's no way the government can continue without appointing someone to act as Lord Protector. And they choose the Duke of York, because he's...
Well, lo and behold, could have predicted that.
Yeah, because he's the king's cousin. Aside from the Edward, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of York would be his likely successor if the king died. And he's the richest man in England. He's just the richest duke. So he makes sense as a pick.
It does make sense.
Yeah.
So not only is he incredibly competent at governing, but he also does hold a claim to the throne.
Yeah.
And sort of has the financial assets to sort of back it up.
Yeah.
So really, he's in as good a position as you could hope to be in
Yeah.
at that point.
The only thing is, with his position, is he's relying on the Nevilles. It's just them that support him, really, other than a few tepid guys, because he pissed off the Earl of Devon as well quite soon into his regency as protector by trying to be fair, basically, and saying that he wanted to win over Devon's enemy, the Bonville family, but that just ended up losing Devon for him. So he tried to be good, but he lost Devon, and that pushed him more towards the Lancaster camp.
And so anything that the sort of Nevilles get involved with would inadvertently drag the Duke of York into it as well.
Yeah, pretty much. They're entwined now. And as soon as he is protector, York makes it clear that he's favouring the Nevilles. Salisbury becomes Chancellor after the last one died. He gives his son Warwick the captaincy of Calais. And it's really just those two that he gives power to, but they're the big ones, and the government can't function now without York and the Nevilles. And that's how it goes on for a bit. Margaret becomes increasingly suspicious of York, and believing that eventually he's going to try and overthrow Henry VI and her son, so that he can be king. But then on Christmas Day, 1454, Henry VI wakes up and he starts to function again.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's an unintended event, isn't it?
Yeah.
He just
He
randomly
gets
wakes
better.
up one day.
He gets better.
Hey, guys, I've been out cold for a year.
Yeah. And he immediately starts to undo everything York did. That was something I didn't say. York immediately puts Somerset in prison.
Right.
Henry VI immediately releases him and gives him power again.
Well, that can't be good.
He immediately takes Salisbury out of the chancellorship. Warwick, I think Warwick kept Calais for a bit longer, but I might be wrong there. And then sooner or later, as 1455 rolls around, Henry VI and Somerset and Queen Margaret decide to summon a new parliament, and York and the Nevilles are not invited to this parliament, which makes them think this is going to be an attack against them, so they raise an army.
So given the sort of prominence of both York and the Nevilles, why weren't they invited?
It's never been confirmed what this parliament was going to be about. Obviously, because they weren't invited, one can infer that it was going to be some sort of act against them. A bit later, they would, but both York and the Nevilles would get attainted in a parliament in 1459, which is a parliament bill that strips a nobleman of all his titles and all his lands and bars their heirs from ever inheriting any land, basically. So I imagine they assumed that's what was going to happen to them in 1455, and they decided they were going to stop that from happening by raising an army and stopping Henry VI from getting to Leicester, where he'd called the Parliament, because he was just more popular in the Midlands than he was in London. And so they cross paths at St Albans, which is where the first battle takes place.
Albans.
Yes, the first one.
The first one. Hint, there were more to come.
At least one more.
At least one more.
But it's this weird medieval battle, because it was barely a battle. It was more like, in terms of how it was fought, it was more like a modern sort of street battle. It was physically in the town instead of being in a field nearby it. Yeah, it was actually
sort of on par with what you'd expect from the 100 Years' War. Instead, it's more like a sort of town brawl.
Yeah, but with a lot of swords and colourful flags. You had Warwick's men all hiding in alleys and then jumping out at the Somerset and the King's men and fighting them. And obviously, they were not expecting such an attack.
No, not in the town at least.
They lost hard. The Percy Earl of Northumberland was killed. The first Duke of Somerset was killed. Their sons both took over. And the Duke of York managed to take possession of Henry VI and get a bit of government going again over him. And he managed to have what he'd done in the Protectorate restored. Salisbury got the Chancellorship back. Warwick got Calais back. And once again, things looked okay for York. Because again, Henry VI had very little mind of his own. He was just happy to go along with whatever the people that had his ear told him to do. And if that was York, or if that was his wife, or if that was Somerset, that's all fine with him.
So in that case, when Henry VI woke up, why did he immediately sort of take power away from the Duke of York?
I would assume that's the role of Margaret of Anjou.
I see.
Because there were rumours as well that her son by Henry VI was actually the son of one of the Duke of Somerset's sons. No, it was actually just the Duke of Somerset, I think, actually. Correction. So they were close. That's probably not true as a rumour, but they were good allies, and Margaret did not trust York whatsoever.
And do we think that Margaret will have a sort of recurring role within the war?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, she comes back.
Oh, recurring
She comes
character.
back kicking. And things are all right for a couple of years. York tries to put a bit of balance in while also building his own support, because the tensions probably aren't over at that point.
No, I can't imagine they'd simmer out overnight.
Yeah. Henry VI did have one good idea, though, that was his own, and it was in 1458, and it was called the Love Day,
The love day. Well, that's considering he had no reaction to his newborn son.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concoction on his part.
It was a day in London where all York, his family and the Nevilles, and all of the Lancastrian supporters walked through London together, and he made it so that at the front of this parade, York and Queen Margaret were holding hands,
oh my
walking
God.
throughout the city for the people to see. And it's not a bad idea to show, like, oh, you know, it's in the past, we're friends, look at us. But they must have been fuming.
I'm sure they were. I don't think being stuck in a parade with your arch nemesis is exactly a way to kind of repair bridges.
Yeah. It was probably more for show than anything else, but
yeah, that's probably the most advanced thing that Henry VI came up with.
To be honest,
we can assume. Yeah.
He set up Eton College, which has also had disastrous consequences for English politics. To be honest,
it has.
So he's not done anything good, really.
As far as English kings go, he isn't great.
He's had long-reaching bad effects.
Yep. 500 years on, we still feel it.
Yeah. But then, in 1459, Henry VI falls ill again.
Of course he does. Too much love day, it seems.
Yeah, he loved up it a bit too hard and collapsed. This is a less long illness, but it still has the same consequence that Margaret and Somerset, the son of the last Somerset, still end up around him when he wakes up. And so, by this point, York is over in Ireland again. The Nevilles are just doing their thing in the north and in Calais, and then Margaret takes that opportunity to call another parliament, and this time they are attainted, because she genuinely no trust at all. Yeah, so now they've lost everything, and a lot of people think that's quite harsh.
That is quite harsh, isn't it?
Yeah, considering at that point they've not really done anything that bad or egregious.
No.
So they're fully attainted. A lot of people think that's harsh, and it actually has the inverse effect of lending them more support.
Who could have guessed that?
Like, people start thinking, well, this seems a bit overkill. Why have you done this? And thinking, you know what, maybe York and Neville aren't so bad after all. And then the battles begin again, and there's a few of them where there's this weird Wheel of Fortune effect, where it's like York victory, Lancaster victory, York victory, Lancaster victory.
So neither side can really gain a sort of military advantage against the other.
There's a few key battles that I'll mention, but we're getting up to the end of this now, because these start coming in thick and fast. The Battle of Northampton in July 1460, Warwick took possession of Henry VI again, so he's back in Yorkist hands, and after that, York goes into London, and the Act of Accord is passed, which makes a play for the throne and disinherits the Prince of Wales, and says York will succeed Henry VI.
And then we get the famous Battle of Towton.
Got one more.
One more to go before Towton.
First, we've got the Battle of Wakefield.
Oh,
which is
Wakefield.
This is York and Salisbury have gone up north for their Christmas, and they've taken York's second son Edmund with them, while his first son Edward spends Christmas with Warwick in Calais instead. And Margaret takes her men up north, because she's still got Northumberland in the north, so she's still got allies there, and attacks their castle just outside Wakefield, and they get absolutely massacred. York's dead, Salisbury's dead, Edmund's dead.
So Richard, the Duke of York.
No more.
He's gone.
Now it's his son Edward, the Duke of York, who's off with Warwick.
So we have a new protagonist now.
Yes, there's no more Richard. It's time for Edward now. And Edward is an 18-year-old guy. He's, according to the sources, very handsome, very tall. He's supposedly 6'4".
Well, that is very tall for the time.
Yeah. So, picture the scene. You've got on one hand this weak king, Henry VI, who can't make his own mind up about anything, and he's dominated by his wife, who is French, which is, given recent history, not a great thing for the English. Or, instead of that, you can have this 18-year-old young man who's really tall, really good looking, an excellent commander. Who would you go for?
Well, it all comes down to type, doesn't it?
He's got PR on his side.
He definitely
Edward.
has.
So he proves himself in a couple of battles and ends up in London, where he's actually crowned or proclaimed King Edward IV by the Earl of Warwick and the Duke of Norfolk, who's now committed himself to the Yorkist side. And then they go up north to chase down the remainders of the Lancastrians, and that's where you get to Towton, the second bloodiest battle in English history. And it's actually 2 battles, really, over the course of 2 days. But long and short, Edward IV proves that he's a fantastic commander and whoops the Lancastrians hard. Henry VI and Margaret and Prince Edward flee into Scotland. Loads of Lancastrians are killed, including the man that killed his younger brother, Edmund.
Sweet vengeance.
Yeah. Warwick can't compete in the second day of battle because he got shot in the leg, but that's fine. He survives into the new king's reign. And now we have King Edward IV of the House of York.
In power now.
In power. And maybe he'll rule well. Maybe he's got to... Well, he definitely needs to do something to deal with Henry VI and Margaret. But that's for another day.
That is for another day. So we've gone from having a really weak king to the son of the previous Lord Protector now as king in the span of a decade. Quite a big development, especially around this period, when hereditary monarchs are more or less, I wouldn't say exactly stable, but the line of succession is a bit clearer than what we're getting here.
Yeah.
So yeah, that brings us to the end of the first episode of the Ripples of History podcast. And yes, I did come up with that name on the spot just now. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, do leave a like, drop a comment. Obviously this is quite a big departure from my usual style of video, so I am interested to hear what you think. Do subscribe to stay up to date, and like always, I've been Iravic, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good winter. So we're going to be talking about the 100 Years' War, and more specifically its outbreak. So I'm joined here today by...
Wars of the Roses.
Oh my fucking